there. It's Geraldine Ryan Lush back again to talk further about this book. And I've been asked to do more readings on this book. The last time I read half the story. And today I may read the rest of the story, or I may start from the beginning. I'll make up my mind shortly. Anyway, before I do that, I'm just going to read some of the reaction this book has received since it was published. Published now, maybe around 2 years ago it was published. It received the Reader's Favorites 5-Star Choice Award. Reader's Favorites, for those who don't know anything about the Reader's Favorite reviewing source, is a reviewing source which has received the Honoring Excellence Award for reviewing and is a member of the National Book Critics Circle. Kids Books Now, a reviewing source nationally and internationally, called it a delightful story for all ages. Mirrored Exchange, which is an international reviewing source, called it, or said, aunties and grandmas will nod their heads knowingly while rooting for this obsessed lady. Reader's Loft, an online review source, Mrs. C has a method to her madness. Loved this book. The Clutter Gal, an online reviewing source, cute, sweet, sad and funny is what they said about Mrs. Clogiggledy clutter. Book Blog Tours said, the ideal grandmother-granddaughter reading bond. Some customer reviews from Barnes & Noble. I love this book. I love my bits and pieces, and this lady I so identify with. Gorgeous illustrations. And another from Barnes & Noble, delightful. Mrs. C is unforgettable. Those are just some of the reaction reviews the book has received to date. This book is written and illustrated by me. It concerns a lady who, like I said before a couple of times when doing videos talking about this book as well as other books I have written. It's a story that it's not really categorized into age groups because it is a children's book, yes, but it's a subject matter is so it's written in such a style that it's such a bonding style that can easily be shared with children and anybody, any grown-ups. Grown-ups too will love it because it has been called actually a picture book for grown-ups because it's full of pictures. It's around 40 or more illustrations, and they're all very pastel shades and very homey and very warm and inviting and so typical and appropriate for all the chaos going on, especially since the COVID-19 chaos is still going on in the world. So I think it's probably fitting to look at books and be among books and materials that speak to warm and reassuring tone and style and voice for everyone, because we certainly need that in this stage we're at in our society now. So anyway, this book concerns a lady who loved to collect, and she also loved to paint, and she was doing fine with her collections and everything until one day she became very lonely because her daughter moved away to a faraway place, New Zealand actually, and she got so lonely she started going out and shopping, and where she loved to collect she discovered thrift stores, so she started buying and buying and buying until her habit became out of hand. And this is where I think I left off in the story before, and I'll share some of the pictures in the book up to where I left off. These are some of the things she painted. This is some of her collectibles that she painted. She was a hobby artist and she painted pictures of her art collection. So anyways, this goes on to, she had quite a cozy little place for doing all her things, and she even put her jewellery on push pins on the wall. So she's all to better to see them with, she says, as she's hung each one over a push pin and went to look for still more clutter. Mrs. Clogiggledy had clutter coming out of everything except her ears, and she had the room. She would have clutter coming out of her ears too. So anyway, here she is with her earrings, just having some fun with her hats and her earrings. And she loved hats. As you can see, Mrs. Clogiggledy loved hats. So this is where I think I started, I stopped when the superintendent came by one day and okay, I'll start from there anyways, finish it the rest of it. I think that's probably close to where I left off the last time. It didn't start out that way. Mrs. Clogiggledy didn't always have clutter. She loved her nice, spacious, minimalist apartment when she moved in. But one day the superintendent knocked on her door. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Clogiggledy," he said, "but there are new rules. No pets allowed." So Mrs. Clogiggledy had to give away her Pandora poodles she had for 10 years. She had to give away her pets, her dogs, and her budgie birds. Very sad. But she did give them to friends who she knew would give them good homes. She had to give away her bad budgies too, because they chattered and sang so loudly to each other. The neighbour who worked night shift downstairs complained. This made her so sad that she went out and bought a brand new recliner that she could sit in and listen to calming music while she looked at pictures of her Pandora poodles and bad budgies that she had for 10 years. She called them bad budgies because that was just a pet name for them, because they sang all the time and sang loud, and she liked it, so she called them the bad budgies. I was just having tea here and talking to her daughter in New Zealand, and she's feeling quite sad. Things couldn't get any worse for Mrs. Clogiggledy, but they did. Imelda, her daughter, got fed up teaching in the city and moved to New Zealand for excitement. Mrs. Clogiggledy missed her so much, she went out and bought a brand new sofa on which she could stretch her legs while she had her tea, and chatted to Imelda from New Zealand on Skype. But not for long. Imelda soon met a friendly and strapping sheep farmer with an accent to die for, and lo and behold, she got married in the land down under, and Mrs. Clogiggledy sure wasn't going to fly 2 days underneath the world to see her for a cup of tea and a chat. Not on your life. And here's her daughter, Imelda, who got married in the land down under in New Zealand. So Mrs. Clogiggledy looked around her not so spacious, not so minimalist apartment anymore. She had enough chairs, she had enough sofas, she had enough tables and cabinets and bookcases and whatnots. She had a lot of things. Very beautiful, but she had a lot. What Mrs. Clogiggledy needed now were enough things to put in those tables and cabinets and bookcases and whatnots, and have lots of stimulation, so she wouldn't be lonely without Imelda, who married a man from down under, and Pandora poodles and bad budgies she had to give away. But Mrs. Clogiggledy wasn't getting any younger, and she needed to look after her money. Then one day a bright new message flashed on her computer screen. 50% off at Magic Village today. The message flashed in bouncy colored balls and twinkling stars. It's your special day. Oh my, said Mrs. Clogiggledy, who couldn't believe her eyes. I haven't seen this store before, and 50% off. too cool. Mrs. Clogiggledy had known that everything there was gently used, and a fraction of store prices anyway, and with 50% off along with that. Oh my. So Mrs. Clogiggledy got dressed in a nice vibrant outfit with earrings to match. She took a selfie. Or three, or two, or three. Then she got into her economic on gas Kia and drove to the store with the 50% off sign. She stayed for 3 hours with a half-hour break at the lovely coffee shop across the street. She was in browsing heaven. The next day she took off again. More stores, more sales, more treasures. She bought chubby cherub vases. She bought Fenton glass figurines. She bought imperial glass candlewick. She bought Jeanette glass carnival and Diamond Point, Indiana. See, she knows her stuff. She knows her collections, and she knows her brand names, and she knows her designer names, and she knows her stuff. She bought Wedgwood and Currier and Ives and Waterford crystal, and all for $5 and less. Mrs. Clogiggledy filled her cart. She chatted happily with the other customers, but kept a sharp eye out for people she knew, because she was a very proud lady and didn't want people to know she shopped in those, places. Mrs. Clogiggledy drove happily home in her gas economic Kia and laid down her packages. While she brewed and drank her favorite tea, she lovingly fingered each treasure she had bought so modestly. My, she exclaimed. These are collector's items, and for $5 or $10. Who would have thought? What a place to shop. Then Mrs. Clogiggledy arranged her treasures in all her cabinets with the glass doors, and light switch shone on them and made them sparkle. And she smiled. How beautiful, she told her jewelry-bedecked walls. How simply beautiful. That was it for Mrs. Clogiggledy. She began searching out every garage sale and flea market and auction and boot sale there ever was. She put a lot of gas in her gas economic Kia. She wore a lot of vibrant outfits with earrings to match. She was having a lot of fun. She was running out of space, but that didn't stop her. The neighbors were whispering behind her back. She was a little odd, they said. They wouldn't help her with her packages anymore. The superintendent would leave notes under her door. He wouldn't come in, he said. He was afraid he'd break a leg tripping in her clutter. So the superintendent wouldn't even come around her door to do some chores, whatever, some maintenance work and so on. He was afraid he'd break a leg tripping in her clutter. And the neighbors kept tittering and gossiping. One day when Mrs. Clogiggledy had nowhere to put her clutter except in her fridge, she went to an auction. The neighbors are gossiping about her. She's creating quite a stir in her building. She went to an auction. An enchanting set of Princess Cordelia cottage ware caught her eye. She had to have them. She waved her poster madly and started bidding. A loud man from the back was bidding higher and higher and higher. Mrs. Clogiggledy was getting irritated. $500, she screamed, glaring at the man with an evil eye. Now she would have to sell her gas economic Kia. $525, yelled a big man back. He had gray hair and intelligent spectacles. $600, Mrs. Clogiggledy screeched. She was very peeved. No one was going to outfox her, especially someone with a loud, strange-sounding voice. How dare this upstart think he knew more than she did about Princess Cordelia cottage ware? The nerve. And Mrs. Clogiggledy is very, very bothered. The auctioneer's hammer banged. Sold to the lady in the green outfit and matching earrings. Mrs. Clogiggledy started preen triumphantly. Then she heard the voice again. Congratulations, the man said. You have a good eye. Mrs. Clogiggledy tilted her head. She listened again. an accent to die for. Why, he's from New Zealand, she said to herself. Mrs. Clogiggledy stopped printing triumphantly and walked over to the big man, who also had been a sheep farmer, but now went to auctions. They talked and talked. They talked about Imelda and the land down under. They talked about Chubbit Shirrip and Imperial Glass Candlewick and Diamond Point, Indiana, with casters to match. They talked about Wedgwood and Currier and Eyes and Waterford Crystal. They even talked about Princess Cordelia cottageware, and that she didn't give him the evil eye. They went to more auctions. They went to art galleries and dinner and a theatre and dancing. He shoveled her gas economic Kia. Then they went on trips to the land down under. They went on many trips. Here they are going all over the place on trips. One day Miss Clogiggledy got the shock of her life. A watercolour she had painted of some of her clutter sold at auction for $50,000. $50,000. And this is the watercolour that she painted of some of her hobby art, some of her collectibles, some of her still life and everything she had at home. So she painted pictures of it, and it fetched $50,000 at auction because her work was getting appraised for more and more, and innocent Miss Clogiggledy, as knowledgeable as she was, didn't even know it. Mrs. Clogiggledy bought a new gas economic Kia, and she held on to her clutter everyone told her to give away. She gives half of her art money to worthy causes. Now she has a strapping grey-haired antique dealer with an accent to die for, her clutter to paint pictures of, and a little grandchild bouncing around with the same friendly eyes and an accent to die for. Mrs. Clogiggledy is one happy lady. But Mrs. Clogiggledy still wears a lot of vibrant outfits with earrings to match, because you can't keep a styling lady down. No, you can't keep a styling lady down. That's kind of a mantra for all of us, isn't it? You can't keep us down. You just can't. Anyway, that's the end of the story, and I love this book. I love writing this book, and I love this book. So, and I think a lot of people do. Judging by the response I've received so far, a lot of people do love this book. So, if you're interested in, I hope you enjoy the reading. And if you're interested in obtaining it or looking it out, searching it out more, it's in libraries all over the place, and it's online all over the place, Amazon all over the world, and Barnes and Noble, and all scores of online sites. So just check it out. And thank you so very, very much for looking and listening. And I hope you took great pleasure in my reading. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.